my birthday today, too. So I told you that.
Your birthday today? Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy and Rumors of My Death, as Mark Twain once said, or exaggerated. I've been out on the West Coast. I may as well have died. I didn't get enough sleep, and I've come back with professional and personal challenges, the likes of which I won't bore you with. Some of them will become apparent in the days to come. So, Mike and I were talking briefly. I know I missed a couple days. I was out there and jet lagged. I'm in a hotel this morning because I got back late last night into Hartford and didn't want to drive, an hour or so home. And Mike says, it's my birthday. And I'm thinking, really? And we should say something about it. Then I thought, wait a minute, did we just do this a year ago? And then I'm thinking, oh, yes, birthday. So happy birthday, Mike. Are you now 33?
No, now I'm 34. I survived the year that you thought I would die because that was Jesus's year, but I made it.
Mike is now we know that Mike is no longer divine. I hope all of you out there will lip sync as I do the following. I'm not Marilyn Monroe, but I can try. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. No, and I'm not going to stand on a storm grate and have the skirt blow up around my legs because some people think I have big balls and I wouldn't want it to be portrayed otherwise. So I spent the weekend doing more comedy at the second edition of the comedy camp in Los Angeles. More about that in a moment. But what that does mean is that I didn't get enough sleep, made some new friends, and didn't pay any attention to the news. It was unavoidable, however, yesterday to see the United States Supreme Court decision in the Anderson case, that is the Trump case arising out of Colorado. And the Supreme Court did what we expected to do. The Supreme Court returned a 9-0, a unanimous per curiam by the court decision, saying that Donald Trump should be and must be on the Colorado ballot. It's not a long decision, and I have to confess that the manner in which it is written surprised me. It's not the decision I expected, which is a long way of saying, when I forecast things here, folks, don't take it all too seriously. It's just one man's best estimate. So the decision was that in the 14th, and the issue presented was as follows. In the 14th Amendment, Section 3 has a disqualification clause. And what it basically says is if a person serves in federal office once having taken an oath to protect and defend the Constitution and thereafter engages in insurrection or offers aid and comfort to those who are engaged in insurrection, they become ineligible to serve. A law review article was written late last year or mid-year last that had everybody thinking that this clause was self-executing. And no less a legal scholar than Erwin Chemerinsky has been on a bandwagon saying it is self-executing. The Supreme Court took a position that surprised me. I mean, it basically said that under Section 5 of the 14th Amendment, the so-called enabling clause, where the 14th Amendment says that Congress has the right to pass such laws as are required to effectuate or give effect to the other provisions of the 14th Amendment, it becomes a congressional responsibility to create the means for determining how to impose or enforce Section 3. In other words, you just can't throw this shit against the wall in Colorado, Maine, or bumfuck. Oh, but wait a minute. I did say Maine already. You just can't throw shit against the wall saying, let's hope it sticks. Congress has to come up with something. And so because it hadn't in the Colorado case, Trump must remain on the ballot. Now, those of you, and I know we're kind of stalled on the con law project that we started. We're only in episode 3. I'll probably do a 4th and 5th this week. But you'll want to look at this decision for its discussion of how federalism operates, because it really is a classic discussion of the allocation of powers between state and federal government. State law permits, and our law permits the states to regulate elections and how they are conducted, eligibility, and so forth. There are certain federal limits that beyond which the state can't go. You can't have a poll tax and these kind of things. But when it comes to determining whether a person is eligible or ineligible for federal office, that is a federal responsibility, and it is limited by federal law. And so what the Supreme Court held is that this power belongs to Congress. What I expected the decision to do was to get bogged down in a procedural posture. I expected this case to turn on questions of procedural due process. That is, what notice and what opportunity and what procedures must take place for a disqualification decision to take place in a state. The Supreme Court doubled down and was even more radical than I expected it would be. What it said is this is never a state issue in terms of eligibility for state office, and this is a federal issue, and Congress has to pass something. So what I suspect will happen is that by week's end, there'll be 2 or 3 new, and having flubbed this prediction the first time, let me go out on a limb and make another one. I suspect that by week's end, there will be 2 or 3 proposed pieces of legislation that will create some set of standards or some set of procedures that perhaps a party, an aggrieved party, which would be just about anybody, I suppose, in this case, could activate in order to seek disqualification. And I suspect in Colorado, legislators will do something that mirrors the process that took place. They'll propose legislation that mirrors the process that took place in Colorado, saying, here, we've done it, and let's get it done again. Although it was a per curiam decision, meaning a unanimous decision by the court, and that was by design. The court wanted to speak with one voice, so as to say to the country, this is a settled issue. There's not a lot to argue about. Let's focus on the business of selecting a president. Although there was a per curiam decision, there were dissenting opinions and language that suggests the court's not of one mind. Mike, you highlighted this language. Read, why did you highlight it? Tell us what it says.
This is from the concurrence between Sotomayor, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and I forget the last name for the moment. However, this is the very last sentence in that concurrence, and I'll preface by saying, yeah, perhaps Amy Coney Barrett concurred and said, hey, I can't join the main opinion because it goes further than is necessary. And this is what the concurrence here by Sotomayor and Kagan and Jackson also effectively say. But before I read what's on the screen, I will preface by saying this is exactly why they went further than was necessary. Do you understand why the majority here, even though it's a 9-0 per curiam decision, I get that, but it is possible that it's because there are members on the court that are as dim as those who would write this sentence together. Quote, today, the majority goes beyond the necessities of this case to limit how Section 3 can bar an oath-breaking insurrectionist from becoming president. Although
wait a minute. Wait. Is there an oath-breaking insurrectionist out there? This is a classic example of question begging, This
is exactly what I'm saying. You can't gaslight and say that they went further than is necessary when going further than you say is necessary is proven by your inability to restrain yourself from saying something so unfounded and stupid. You three justices are stupid or deranged.
No. Well, deranged, maybe.
Crazy. That's crazy. Listen to that sentence. Today, the majority goes beyond the necessities of this case to limit how Section 3 can bar an oath-breaking insurrectionist from becoming president.
So here's our weekly reminder that Jalapeno Jack and Madman Merrick still haven't proven to the satisfaction, at least of us, that Donald Trump was an oath-breaking insurrectionist. In the January 6th prosecutions to date, there has been no link between the events that got people prosecuted on January 6th and the president, other than the speech that he gave in the dais, where he said to people, go and fight like hell. If you don't, you won't have a country any longer. That was an exhortation to protest. It wasn't incitement to violence. And no one has charged incitement in this case. And there is a missing link in the January 6th prosecutions between those on the ground and those in the White House. And no amount of chest thumping by Sonia Sotomayor, Barrett and company will change that.
It's
Now,
amazing. How is this a 9-0 decision with this sentence layered in there? How is this a 9-0 decision?
Well, I think it had to be a 9-0 decision. And here's why it is. If you read, as I've asked all of you to do, and I'm not in my office, so I can't hold up the book and show it to you. If you read Cass Sunstein's book on constitutional interpretation, you get insight into what the real battle is in our courts and in our colleges and universities about how to read the Constitution. You know, there are those who talk about the meaning of the Constitution being confined to what it was intended to be at the moment it was written. There are those who say that its meaning is cabined by the original understanding of the terms that were used at the time it was written. And there are those who say that the history of the document as it is unfolded and been interpreted become the lens through which to read the Constitution. And then there are those who say it's a living Constitution. You know, you basically look in the mirror and you can see whatever you find in it, which is a little bit unruddered and unprincipled. Sunstein advances a different point of view, and he talks about a theory of constitutional interpretation that involves or is focused on what he calls democracy enhancing norms. And a democracy, and thus we have a democratic republic, and whatever yields more transparency and more participation in government should be the lens through which we interpret the Constitution. So I think what happened here, Mike, I think that Sotomayor, I don't know that Barrett would, I know that Kagan would, you know, they would focus on democracy enhancing norms as a viable theory of constitutional interpretation. And I think that the majority concluded that for the sake of the republic, we need to put this controversy behind us, because the legitimacy of our institutions is at stake in 2024, and to keep Trump off the ballot would be a profoundly delegitimizing thing. So we're going to keep him on, but we're not going to agree about why we're doing it. So it's a 9-0 decision. We'll revisit it more. There are other things I want to talk about today, so let's move on. The comedy, you know, quick report on LA. And, you know, I'd be interested in hearing from some of you who are regular viewers, you in particular, Maury. I had a very interesting exchange with Carolyn Ray. You know, one of the things that I'm learning as an aspiring comic is you got to talk about what you know. Well, if there's anything that I know pretty well, you know, it's what it's like to have controversial cases and to be hated for it. And so I make comedic grist out of the material in that mill. And I talk openly about my representation of people like Alex Jones, my representation of the Proud Boys, my reputation of murderers, rapists, child abusers. And I opened the bit that I did at the Improv on Sunday night by basically, and this was largely a group that knew me. Although it was open to the public, I'd say that 80% of the people there were people who'd spent 4 or 5 days together. And I stood up and I said, hi, I'm Norm. I'm an assaholic. You know, that's the classic line from opening an AA meeting, except you're supposed to say you're an alcoholic. I often say to people in court after a particularly outrageous and obnoxious outburst of mine, I'm so sorry, you know, I'm a member of AA. And then they look at me, oh, well, that explains it. Fucking alcoholic. I'm an assaholic anonymous. I tell them, you know, I know what the 12 steps are to being gracious, but every day I fall over them, and my higher power just didn't get in my way that time. So I'm tired. You know, I'm sorry I called you a fucking asshole. It fit in the moment, but I realized that your asshole is also fit for shitting or whatever. And so, you know, I opened briefly with that, and I did learn a lot thanks to the crew out there about cooking your material down, being quick, being brief, which is not what I'm doing here. And then the second, you know, I talk about the cases I do, and then I end with a series of other riffs, including my favorite nursery rhyme, Hillary Dillery Doc, the first lady wouldn't suck cock. So Clinton instead caught some Monica head. And the nation then went into shock. And I explained that when I read that to my grandchildren, my wife was really upset. And she told me to go fuck myself, which is geriatric foreplay, you know, and so off we went. At the end of the performance, I thought that Carolyn would I thought she was roasting me. I thought she was breaking it off, and she raised the question, do you really need to lead with all that darkness? You lose people at that. And and there was a divided a set of opinions among people I spoke to afterwards. Some people loved it. Some people were so put off by who I represent, believing that reflects who I am, that they thought she was on to something. And and I think the point is there may be a way to soften the blow. But I say that, coming back into Connecticut today, with the phone ringing and new homicide cases to take today. I mean, I am a person that you go to when the world around you is dark. You're looking for light if you can get it, freedom if you can find it. And it's my job to do what I can to get it for you if I can. So I was kind of tough with Carolyn Ray. And, she has a thing, she's 59 years old. She's born in Canada, and she doesn't want, she's a woman of a certain age that doesn't want to be reminded of her age. Not all women of that age feel that way. Some continue to sparkle and glow. I guess Carolyn doesn't believe herself to be a member of that club. So, I said something about ma'am or something, and this bothered her when I was being invited up to the stage. And she said, "That's not what I'm looking for." And I said, "All right, yes, bitch." Well, this, of course, this didn't play well. She was looking for queen, this, that, and the other thing. And I don't think she ever forgave me for it. So I wrote her a note later and said, "I'm sorry that I called you a bitch. But I've continued to view a comedic stage as a courtroom. And when I walk into a courtroom, that's my room. And I'll call you what I will, and you will take what I give, and you'll take it with a smile, old lady." But we'll see. So, we'll see how I'll keep you posted. I had a great time, shout out to Elaine in Atlanta, what's that? Yeah, Dawn, that's the thing, So I've made no secret to you folks that I put the psycho in psychoanalysis. I've been in psychoanalysis for 17, 18 years, 4 mornings a week. Before Law and Legitimacy, usually for an hour, I'm like with the psychiatrist, and a psychoanalyst, trying to figure out why it all comes out penises in the end, or at a certain age, why the penis comes out at least. He says, there's a lot going on with old people. Boy, did I learn that this weekend. And comedically, there's a lot of material there. And Dawn, we may be going down, but let's go down swinging, and let's show these young people a thing or two. And Carolyn, you may be 59, but that doesn't mean you're yet fine. So we'll move on. And so on that
comedy, talk more about. I want to hear more about the fantasy camp. Last time you talked about being able to interface with Jay and Adam and Spots, and obviously they have their people kind of running it. But what was it like this time around? What did you learn new that you didn't catch the time before, and what are you looking forward to on the next round?
So the camp, this was its second session. The first session, we were largely lectured at by those within the industry. And so we sat in a large group of 70 to 80 people or so and had very little time on our own feet or time to develop our own material. And it was interesting to learn how the industry is structured out there and how it works. But in terms of personal growth, the effect was the effect was demoralizing. Okay, they say you've got to have your 10,000 hours and be taken credibly, and and you've got to do this and you've got to do that, and they're all talking about these TV shows. And for me, I have a learning disability as a prospective stand-up comic. I don't watch television, so hey, here's the star of, Daddy Dribbles and his oatmeal. And, here's the writer for that show you'll never watch because it's too fucking stupid. And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't want to go there. But so this time around, they got a lot of feedback that we needed to have more workshops and group experiences, and they reconfigured that in the case. And so I had a fellow named Mike August as my group leader, so to speak. There were a group of 80.
August. So I've listened to the Adam Carolla show regularly, and Mike August is a favorite name on there. Good guy.
Well, he's his producer, and he's been around comedy, former agent from the William Morris Agency, and he knows what works. And so he was able. I finally got after so. Those of you who are regular listeners to this show know that it takes me 7 or 8 passes at something to understand it. And so I finally began to understand a little bit about comedy as a separate venue, as a separate genre. Like, I love essays. And I wrote a long essay about the Confessions of a Comic. I don't know if we're going to get it out or not. Send it to Mike over the weekend. That's not comedy. That's an essay about what it is to be a comic with a few lines in there that could become comedic gold. And if you look at the great comics, and we saw some videos of them, they're delivering comedic material in the form of a setup and then a punchline, and it's usually 3, 4, 5 sentences at most. If you get beyond that, you begin to lose people. And so the message was tighten your material. So, for example, I had a lot. I find the mystery of being funny, life funny. I mean, the situations we find ourselves in have me laughing all day long, sometimes crying. But where do you go for material on the mystery of life? Well, the Bible, right? So I thought I might become a priest or a preacher, and I'm reading Genesis, and I'm thinking, what? You got all the power in the world. You're going to create something out of nothing. This is what we got. Spandex, Walmart, Thunder Thighs in the Cheeto aisle. And so, to first say that material, and that can probably be tightened up a great deal more. And so what I learned was rewrite, collect, collect, collect. And what going to an experience like this teaches you is to see the humor all around you. I'm in a Uber yesterday on my way to the airport in LA, and we're on the highway, traffic isn't moving, and suddenly I see the Greater Islamic Association of Los Angeles sponsors this section of the highway. And so I'm next looking for the sign, this IED is brought to you by Hamas, and so it's a nice way to hold juxtaposition in place and to look constantly for material. So I learned that. I also just learned once again just how wonderful people are. There were a number of return people and new people at the camp, and I want to talk and showcase some of their work along the way. I met a young woman. Well, she's not so young. By my perspective, Methuselah is young. I look at that guy and I'm thinking, shit, 800 years. Hey, pal, let's talk when you get your license. I mean, Elaine from Atlanta, I forget her last name, has got enormous potential. There's a young man, Dino, who's got MS and has turned MS into a comedic routine. I saw him perform again, and he was wonderful. But the best bit that I saw was group written. So there's this guy who looks like a character from Harry Potter. He looks like Lurch, without enough money for a haircut. He gets lumbering up on the stage and says, do you hear about the escapee from the Los Angeles Mental Institution? Good, and then he talks about being rejected from one fantasy camp after another and finally getting into the JFK assassination fantasy camp. And he said, it was great. They had material. They sold this bobblehead doll of Kennedy, had kept going back to the left. And the way the guy did it, I mean, I could never do it because he had just had this dry, droll, I'm a puppy dog, please pet me and love me way of doing it. But I might be escaped from a psychiatric institution that was so winning. And they had a number of young students. The event was held at Emerson College, and Emerson College has a separate comedy track, apparently. It's not enough that you pay too much money for an education. That should have everybody laughing. But now they'll teach you to be a comic. They had one young woman who was there and had savage wit, but she looked so innocent. She looked like a 21-year-old barista at Starbucks who her career aspiration was to become a serial killer, and she played the role well. So what I learned was, there's lots of room in the world for comedy. Be brief, be modest, be kind, don't punch down. And as Adam put it, if you want to skyrocket to the middle, grab your crotch, swear at people, and stay there. So yes, Junior, I am profane, and maybe I'll never rise to the top, but I'm having a good time trying. So one of the Mike, I gave you a new podcast to look at. Its first debut is from a attendee of the camp who's been there a couple times now, Christy Schiller. And I think Christy may be watching. It's called Knocking Doors Down. And she and Alyssa Blow, her colleague, do interviews. And she's a woman with a past. Okay, former Playboy bunny, in the middle of a divorce from a Texas oil magnate, lives on something called the Schiller Ranch, and has been involved with rescue dogs for law enforcement. Has been responsible for taking any number of guns and any number of kilos off the street. But and she's got stories to tell. I mean, and she tells them, and she got on her feet. She's also survived, even though she's a 62-year-old woman. She survived 6 strokes recently. So
Yeah.
for those of you women who always thought you should be a Playboy bunny and didn't harbor resentment over that, you can take solace in the fact that God got her revenge on her. He blew her circuits out 6 times last year. So for her to get on the stage and speak at all is an act of courage. And here she is. So I mean, give them some honest feedback, Mike. What's going on over there on that page?
So I had no context for this. You just send it to me and you're like, hey, what do you think? And it took me a second to really find something within it that so first and foremost, the show is very well produced, which when something is as well produced as this show appears to be, but has really low follower or subscriber count and like count, that is I don't want to call it a red flag, but it sends up something that says this is well funded and it may not be merit worthy quite yet, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to be.
No. It just went online yesterday for the first time. So
I know that.
the fact that it's yeah.
But look at what I'm saying is that this is a very consciously thought through, and look at the set design, the sound quality, and the visual cues. You've got the camera will actually pan to the person who is speaking and then pan out when it senses that there are 2 people speaking at the same time. This is a very sophisticated setup, and it's a very well produced show. And for that reason, I immediately was jealous.
Well, what would you expect?
I was jealous because you and I are in the Stone Age.
What would you wait, I gotta get this in. What would you expect? Because Christy, as a former Playboy model, knows what it's like to be pissed off when they've got a staple over your belly button in the centerfold. Okay, I mean, think about the indignity of that. So I can imagine she wants to do very well to avoid.
I had zero context for this at all. I had no idea who either of these people were when you sent it to me, but I listened to the whole thing and I was fascinated. I was actually fascinated. It's Liz on the left, right? Or Liz?
Christy on the left, Alyssa on the right.
All right, so that's maybe they should switch places. Just some feedback for those that don't know who you are quite yet. It's going to be like, which one is which? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I found the Mark Cuban story fascinating. I have very little respect for Mark Cuban in this day and age, but it was fascinating to know that Christie actually was of the interneting of things back in the early 90s, and then that built her credibility with me as a millennial almost instantaneously, having that connection to certain things. I didn't know anything about the oil money or the trust or whatever. It doesn't matter. That to me doesn't matter. I think that what we are in an era, Norm, where we are inundated with new content like this. And I'm, totally self-aware saying this, right? You and I get up every single day and pretend as if people give a shit. We'll continue to do that because that's not why we're, our motivation is a little bit different. But it's interesting when you see something that has one episode that is as well produced, and it means that there is funding behind it. So I'm expecting quite a lot from this platform, just based on that one episode, based on knowing a little bit more about who they are, and based on the issues that they took on. I expect that they're going to have high-profile guests, and they'll get into topics that are compelling. So that's take it for what that is.
So I watched when they first gave a presentation at Comedy Camp in October. They got up and read from their computers, and the material they read was interesting. The performance they put on was not, but it was clear they had plenty to say. I didn't realize that at that point, Christy was first time on her feet in public after these strokes, and so she needed Alyssa's support. I guess it's Alyssa and Chrissy. Maybe the A is cut off there. I don't know, Christy performed solo for the first time, and she tells an hysterical story that should serve as a cautionary tale to those of you who lust after, legendary beauties and pinup girls, and that is, you don't fuck with a Playboy bunny. Here, why? So she was married, and she got intimation that her husband was cheating on her. And she was surprised by that, because as far as she was concerned, this guy's oil derrick stopped pumping juice a long time ago. So she found his Viagra supply, and she thought, wait a minute, this isn't for the drilling rig he's using here at home. This is circumstantial evidence that something's going on elsewhere. So she got even with him, and she found pills that looked similar to the Viagra, but were in fact Valium. And so now she knew when her husband was planning on stepping out on her, because he'd call saying, I'm really tired. I got to pull over and take a nap. So the message that she has to for those of you out there is, don't fuck with a Playboy bunny.
That's interesting. So, yeah, I mean, do you have any? They
All
talked
right,
about
folks.
the
Yeah.
first time. They talked a little bit about the camp, the first go around, but what was the experience with them this time? Did you get to talk to them?
We,
Are we having
a little bit, from time to time. They're an interesting couple. Alyssa's a younger woman. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they're a couple, but they're an interesting pairing. Alyssa comes from a farming community in Iowa. She describes herself with a lesbian, which she's so gorgeous. When I see a gorgeous woman declare that they're a lesbian, I view that as a crime against nature, because I am a male pig. You see a good-looking woman and you're thinking, hubba hubba, ding ding, and then she turns around and says, I got no interest in your thing. I mean, that's just gotta hurt, right? But Alyssa, so she comes from a farming community, younger woman. She works with Alyssa on the ranch, and she didn't perform this time around, and she gives everybody this sort of critical, appraising look, but she's clearly dedicated to Christy. I know they have big plans for the schedule is. I think obviously it's a lot different than us, because as you can see from the splendid background of this hotel room and my brilliant audio quality as I speak into my laptop, we spend a fortune on production here. So I don't know what to expect from them, Mike. I just showcase them to get people to pay attention. And
I thought when you sent it to me, you were going to tell me that we had a new benefactor and they were going to underwrite Law and Legitimacy and help us scale the show. I'm just, disappointed to hear that that's not what's going on here.
Well, yeah, we do. Yes, yeah. No, Hamas is suffering right now in terms of its critical infrastructure. So I keep being told the check's in the mail, but Allahu Akbar anyhow. So listen, folks, that's it. I got to get back into the office today and play law. It's an hour or so drive away. We'll be back tomorrow. And if anybody's heard anything more about the Fani Willis case, or excuse me, Fani Willis. I want to know about it. I know that McAfee is likely to make his decision this week, late this week. I'm doubting that he'll disqualify her, but yet I hear more emails surfaced over the weekend where Fani apparently said to Wade's lawyer that they've got to put the ice on news about the affair between she and Nathan. Don't know. We'll talk more about that and everything else tomorrow morning. Thanks for tuning in. Mike, how do people find us?
You can find us on X at LawPod Daily. You can also find us on YouTube at LawPod Daily. We're here every single day, 8 a.m. Eastern time. And no, I didn't leave Tumble off on purpose. I just forgot about it. I'm just kidding. You can find us on Rumble at Law and Legitimacy as well. And if you don't catch the live or you just want the audio only, we're on every single major podcast hosting and streaming platform imaginable. Leave us 5 stars and a positive review. Norm, we will see you tomorrow morning. Glad to have you back in the saddle. Thank you, everybody, for the birthday wishes. And AMF, yo-yo.
AMF.
See y'all.